You've just succeeded in doing something that no person has accomplished, and that's infiltrate the U.S. government's secret facility located in the Nevada desert, the mysterious black site known as Area 51. You look the part, having spent the last year studying and then stealing the identity of your Uncle Clarence, a man that works at the facility and who once said to you, "I can't tell you what I do, kid, but I can tell you this. You wouldn't believe me if I did tell you." And now you're in. You come to a door deep within the facility, having navigated a labyrinth of corridors. Above the doors is a sign, and in bold red letters it reads "Restricted." Your heart is beating fast and your hands are trembling as you swipe your ID card. The door buzzes, and with a swooshing sound it moves to the side. Oh my good God, you think. That's what they're hiding from us. Okay, so that might sound like something from a James Bond movie, and we imagine long before you got to that door, you'd have been arrested or killed. But what if you really could get that far? What would you see? You certainly'd see something surprising, that's for sure, because there's a good reason the USA keeps its black site secret. Before we tell you where the billions of dollars go, let's first look at the history of what's sometimes referred to as the black budget. So what we know is that the US military is constantly involved in secret research projects. You won't be surprised to learn that as you watch this video, the military is running all kinds of covert operations. If you listen to guys like the whistleblower named Edward Snowden, you'd hear that many billions of dollars are spent on those operations. These projects are incredibly secret, so much so that they're often hidden from various elected officials. They're as black gets. However, time passes and things that were secret before become common knowledge. Take, for example, the bunch of scientists and military men that got together during the Second World War. They wanted to build a nuclear bomb, so around 130,000 people got to work under what was known as the Manhattan Project. The black sites where the research and development took place were located not just in the US, but also in Canada and the UK. It was a huge project and something like $2 billion was spent on it. That's about $25 billion in today's money. So that's a good example of the black budget, but you've got to ask, if they were capable of producing world-destroying weapons around 80 years ago, what are they capable of now? Well, let's first go back to the 1980s, a decade in which a man named Ronald Reagan was the President of the United States. When he sat in the big chair, the black budget tripled. We found a declassified CIA document that explained what some of the cash was spent on. That document explained that even Congress wasn't party to what happened in some of the programs. It seems that the only rule about the black budget is you don't talk about the black budget. But thankfully, we have that thing called declassification. Under Reagan, the military had one secret project called the Defense Communications Island Sun. It wasn't all that high-tech and just involved the military making special lead-lined trucks that could transport top brass generals in the event of a nuclear attack by the Soviet Union. Getting bombed by the Soviets was what you might call a top priority threat, and that's why billions were spent on something called Operation Millstar, a project consisting of creating a massive communication network if those nuclear bombs should ever fall on the US. Maybe that's not strange enough for you, but we've only just started. Be patient, dear viewer, you don't know what's coming. The US has built some pretty incredible secret weapons with the budget, with one being the very odd-looking Northrop Tacit Blue plane. This plane, that was sometimes nicknamed the Alien School Bus, was called a Low Observable Stealth Surveillance Aircraft. It was very hard to detect by enemy radar, even when very close to a battlefield. Even though it looked a bit like a flying white chocolate bar, the plane was extremely high-tech when it was built in the early 80s. The thing is, you wouldn't have known anything about it. And that's because when the military started the Battlefield Surveillance Aircraft Experimental Program, it was top secret. It was developed and built at Area 51 and flown first by a test pilot named Richard G. Thomas. And no, he didn't get shot down. He lived to the ripe old age of 76. You only got to hear about the plane in 1996 when information about it became declassified. We learned then that the cost of building that ugly thing was over $2 billion when you take into account the entire project. After hearing that, you might wonder what concoctions are currently flying above your head. What do billions get you these days? Well, we can tell you that some black projects relate to what are called psychological operations, or PSYOPs for short. These very covert operations might sound like something from an outlandish YouTube conspiracy theory video, but we can tell you that they are very real. You can see declassified CIA documents that tell you that cash is spent on getting into the heads of people, whether at home or abroad. At home, the CIA wants the people to think a certain way, say about invading a foreign country. It wants the people on side, and it wants the soldiers on side. And so by disseminating information, it wins the hearts and minds of the people. Social media is where the new info war is taking place, and many countries right now are running their own propaganda campaigns there. You probably don't know this, but there is white, gray, and black propaganda when used for psychological operations. White is basically true information, gray is kinda true, and black is outright deceit. What the CIA is up to right now in regard to PSYOPs, we just can't say because it's top secret. But trust us, something will be going down either at home or abroad. The CIA has even been known to infiltrate people's TVs. So you might wonder if you've ever viewed any CIA-backed information online. It's not a secret that it happens. We just aren't privy to the details. The Department of Defense even has its own description of psychological warfare. It goes like this: the planned use of propaganda and other psychological actions have the primary purpose of influencing the opinions, emotions, attitudes, and behavior of hostile foreign groups in such ways as to support the achievement of national objectives. The CIA has also had a hand in Hollywood, shaping what we've seen on our screen in the interest of national security. Secretly, the Pentagon has backed over 1,000 movies and has a hand in developing lots of titles you've seen on your screen. You can now find some of this information through the U.S. Freedom of Information Act, and if you look at that, you'll see CIA-backed movies such as Transformers, Flight 93, Iron Man, and The Terminator. It's all about winning hearts and minds, and it isn't cheap. It doesn't just create, it also omits. For instance, when the CIA saw the script for the movie called Meet the Parents starring Robert De Niro, it said, hey, we don't want to see any agency torture manuals. When Marlon Brando is going to release a new movie about the Iran-Contra scandal, he was outbid on the rights by a film studio. It's now thought that the CIA was behind this and that the film studio was a front company that was created by the CIA. Then you had Operation Mockingbird during the Cold War. The covert operation involved the CIA creating fronts that appeared to be people-like magazines or cultural organizations. The operation also included infiltrating popular news media such as The Washington Post, The New York Times, and Newsweek. The worrying thing is, if you believe what some researchers now tell us, the program has never officially been discontinued. We just don't know what's going on, since how the CIA influences media and film is covert. But it's likely that hearts and minds are being steered in certain directions today. So we must remember that a large part of the black budget, many billions in fact, goes toward what we call non-military projects. Much of this involves surveillance, and that surveillance is done in the name of national security. In 2013, news media talked about a $52.6 billion black budget, saying then that while the government doesn't deny the money is being spent, it doesn't ever say how it's being spent. Back then, the National Intelligence Program comprised 107,035 employees working in 16 different spy agencies, so a lot of the cash went toward paying those people. You might have heard of one of those employees, an intelligence contractor named Edward Snowden. He blew the whistle on various global surveillance programs and then had to get the hell out of America. It's a long story, but in the interests of this show, we can tell you that black ops run by the US government, sometimes with the UK intelligence, involves a lot of spying. Spying on people of interest, but also on folks just like you. According to the Washington Post that received information from Snowden, 90% of the spying was on what it called ordinary Americans. When asked about all that spying and where all the black budget cash goes, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence had this to say: "Our budgets are classified as they could provide insight for foreign intelligence services to discern our top national priorities, capabilities, and sources and methods that allow us to obtain information to counter threats." Okay then, we'll have to look elsewhere. It's estimated that around 50% of the black budget goes to the National Security Agency, with the people that work there mainly being tasked to develop surveillance technology and then implement it. But what about the rest of the cash? Well, first we should tell you that the black budget was dramatically increased during the Reagan years. Under George Bush, it doubled, and it was increased a lot under the present president. When Bush was president, something called Program Element 0603891C received almost $200 million, which is quite the chunk of money. Since the project was secret, no one really knew what it was about, although analysts that studied the budget said it involved creating space weapons. Okay, so now it gets a bit weird. While people that work at various black sites don't tell us what they do, many of them wear uniforms with patches on them. The patches likely designate what kind of work they do. One guy managed to get photos of 75 different patches. Some of the designs featured demons, scantily clad warriors, dragons releasing bombs, wizards, and skunks firing laser beams into the air. Another featured a dragon whose wings were the American flag. It had the earth held in its giant claws. The people wearing that patch worked for the National Reconnaissance Office. Make of that what you will, but it's unlikely that the patches don't represent anything at all. The Pentagon was contacted by the New York Times and asked about those patches, but as usual, it was tight-lipped. If you had the black budget document in front of you, much of it would be covered with the word classified. But we did manage to see the names of some projects on a recent budget. The problem is that it's hard to work out what the project is about from the name. An example is the project Tractor Hip. That was $16.4 million that went to the Army, but you might wonder what a tractor hip is. Then there was the project Chalk Eagle that went to the Navy and cost a whopping $534 million. Some other names were Retract Juniper, Link Evergreen, Pilot Fish, Chalk Coral, Link Plumeria, Retract Maple, Cobra Judy, and Tractor Cage. Some of the latest projects are thought to be space weapons programs, but no one's really sure. When the Director of National Intelligence was asked recently, he replied with this: "Beyond the disclosure of the NIP top-line figure, there will be no other disclosures of currently classified NIP budget information because such disclosures could harm national security." NIP stands for National Intelligence Program. So what's going on right now at all those black sites, we can't say for sure, but we think after watching this video you have a pretty good idea. Now you need to watch what happens at and what do we know about Area 51, and then evidence that aliens have made contact.